Claudia's laughing because we have this thing about her being David or Jonathan. We haven't decided who's who yet, but we are each other's David and Jonathan.
You told me that I was David. And
Yes,
you were
because she's the
Jonathan.
Hulk. Like, and Claudia, I said this before, has a very good knack at telling people how to get off without actually being me. Like, and they listen. And I'm just like, don't talk to me. Like, I do not have the patience to be nice, but I'm learning. Okay. Hi guys, it's so nice to be back. I am literally gonna do an intro video, so check it out here. Okay, I hope you enjoyed the intro video. I decided to upgrade a little bit. Let's do this podcast for real. You'll see the cover page has changed. A lot of things have changed. I'd really love it if you shared it because I spoke about something this week that really hit me hard. During the season of my wilderness, I was really going back and forth about the kinds of topics that I talk about, but just in general, the kind of conversations that I have with people. And one of the things I think that stood out to me was that I was still holding back. And someone said that to me last year as well. Like, I tend to hold back with some of the things that I'm talking about. But because I recognized before it was mentioned to me, when was it? It was last week? Tuesday. The Tuesday that we went to go and shoot.
Oh, yeah.
We had this conversation the week before where I said I feel like I talk in extremes. Either I'm super, it's end of the world, or oh, it's new birth, whatever. Like, I am like super extreme. I don't talk about things in the middle, or just, how do I put it? I don't know how to soften stuff when I talk about them. And what I recognize is because I think in extremes, I have a tendency to get excited about either this side or that side, when a lot of the middle stuff is stuff that I think are things we can talk about. So someone did actually say that to me this week. They're like, I'm always thinking like the worst possible thing or the best possible thing, not the neutral parts, the parts where where the stretch, I think, actually happens. Is my earring knocking on the mic? Okay, let's just fix that. Anyway, let me just move it. Hold on, my coffee for me. Oh, you got a cute t-shirt on. I'm going to post a picture of Claudia on Instagram, so just check it out. So that y'all can see her as my producer. Hey. Anyway, so the funny thing about also bringing up the extremes is today I'm going to talk about a topic that I think is very extreme for a lot of people. Well, it's extreme for you and for people who are in your sort of scenario. And for me, it's not extreme because it's something I was introduced to when I was very young. So what I'm going to be talking about is sex. Let's talk about sex, baby. That song is actually very relevant for this conversation. But the reason I want to talk about sex is because something that I brought up last week. So I made the decision to be celibate, right? And the reason I did that was I realized that I wasn't I wasn't having sex for the sake of connection. I wasn't having sex, even in my marriage, I wasn't having sex because it meant anything to me. I actually don't necessarily enjoy having sex. For me, it was just like, this is what you're supposed to do, so now you're going to do it. But when I started digging a little deeper into the conversation or my thought pattern on why I was indulging in it, I wasn't indulging in it like recklessly. But I'm saying even when I was married, like for me, it was the commodity that I used to get stuff done. My marriage had taught me that sex was monetized. I could use sex as a tool to navigate through the things that I was finding difficult through my marriage, finding difficult to receive, like love and attention and affection, were things that I needed to pay to receive. I wasn't just receiving them because I was me or because I was loved. I was loved because I needed to pay in return for that love, right? And although, I mean, I've spoken about this on, I think, the previous podcast. I did speak about, not this specific one, but years back, I spoke about being promiscuous as a teenager. Something my family doesn't want me to talk about, which is odd to me, because my promiscuity came from something I had now fully discovered hadn't entirely resolved itself, which was a need for attention. A need for, not even attention, a need to feel valued, loved, and seen. And I've spoken about being seen on here, but sex for me was the most intimate way that I felt like someone is going to see me. So I indulged in sex very young, prior to getting married. And at the time, I was obviously not thinking about it. I was just like, okay, someone wants to be with me. And what would happen is, the second someone paid that kind of attention to me, something in me would come alive. It was that my value system all of a sudden started to make sense, but it was directed towards the person. I didn't have any self-worth, or hold myself valuable in any kind of way. So I needed someone else to see me as valuable. And then what I was going to do for that was give them something in return. And I found myself throughout my adult years continuing to do that. My marriage exacerbated the problem because, like I said, sex was monetization in my marriage. I needed to give sex in order to receive literally anything else. And it was my negotiating tool. So I never got to a point where it was meaningful in my marriage, which is actually sad now that I think about it, because sex is supposed to be a very intimate, meaningful act, right? That's what God intended for it to look like. So when you are in your mind thinking, okay, I'm going to be sexy tonight, because this is what I used to do. I used to be like, I'm going to be sexy tonight and do all the nice things, and I know that if I do things the way that he wants or whatever, for the next week or whatever, he's going to pay more attention to me. That didn't always work, but for the most part, I'd get the kind of attention I needed just for a little bit, even though they weren't deep, meaningful conversations, which is something I craved in my marriage. I craved that through the roof. So much so that I was now seeking that from friends outside. Because this is a conversation I have with people on and off. I was so lacking of being seen and lacking of intimate relational communication that I started reading articles on how to find that outside of my marriage with friends, right? I wasn't planning to cheat or any of that stuff, although that did eventually happen. But I started reading a lot of articles to figure out how to resolve the issue I was finding in my marriage. If I could find it in friends outside, then I wouldn't feel so alone in my marriage. So I read a lot of articles. One article in particular said to me, you can find that wholesome, deep, meaningful friendships outside of your marriage that fulfill you, so that you're not requiring this from your marriage, which, guys, is bad advice. It is the worst. The second you're having to do that, you are alone in your marriage. You are the only person who's in this marriage. Don't even think that is a good idea to do. So anyway, I read this article, and then I found a circle of friends, three particular women who really had value in my life, it's actually four, who spoke to my life, who I spent time with. We'd have breakfast, and then it would end in lunch, and then we'd be together still at supper time. And at 7 p.m. I'm getting a call from home like, where have you been all day? Because these people were my soul sisters. We connected in ways that I had longed for. And I love deep, meaningful conversation. Things that are about the weather are just not my vibe. We're not going to be talking about that. We're going to be talking about what you're healing through, what you're dealing with, what the realizations is. And now, me and your friendship is based on biblical understanding as well, and understanding what God wants in the season of us growing and learning, and all that. That's part of my character. That's part of who I am. But my marriage was never able to give me that. So I used sex as a tool to try and get that back, and then later realized it wasn't going to work. So in an attempt to keep my marriage sanctified in my head, I thought, okay, let me find this outside. It worked for a while. It worked for about 3 to 6 months. But then I realized that I was so hungry. I was hungry to connect with my person. If I am having sex with you, running a business with you, have a family with you, doing all these things, I want to be able to connect with you on every single level. And that is when I woke up to the idea that marriage cannot exist without relational intimacy. It is not going to happen. So I'm going to bridge the cheating thing here, because eventually I started to realize that that was not going to happen. And I'd have conversations outside of my marriage with men, not intending to do anything with them. Like I'd end up in a business meeting and I'm talking to someone who I realize I have a lot of relational equity with, a lot of connection in this area with. And that's how I crossed the line, right? I made a very bad decision and I take accountability for that all of the time. I made a very bad choice because stepping out of my marriage was something I was not intending to do. I can blame a lot of other things, and I could literally list 20 reasons for you for why that could have happened. But at the end of the day, I made that decision. But then there was a point just before the end of my marriage when I was concerned about why I would want to do that in the first place, because I know that's not who I am character wise. I held it down well for a good 12 years, 15 in total. And I started to feel, how can I say, a lot of shame around the fact that I stepped out of my marriage, and my husband at the time had known about some of this, so he was like bringing it up. So what I was doing in my healing process was trying to understand why I in the first place would do this. And it never came full circle. And I read a book that said once, sometimes the situation in your life is so frustrating and so suffocating that you look for an escape. And I'm telling you, I resonated with that statement immediately. And the book wasn't about this. The book was about something completely different. But there's a section in one of the chapters where they spoke about this, and I was like, I felt suffocated. Like I felt like I was not allowed to be myself. So I escaped to people or whatever who actually see me for who I am and didn't expect me to be anything else. And that's how I ended up just engaging in whatever I engaged in. I don't recommend it, especially in the kind of marriage I was in. I don't recommend it because that statement or that behavior follows you in conversation for the rest of your life, and it's a cross I'm gonna have to bear forever, which I accept, right? Which is why I talk so openly about it. But one of the things that I had now decided now, after all of this had happened, ending up in the homeless shelter, coming out, being back in the backpack, is just trying to rebuild my life. I had to make a decision to become celibate. And the reason I chose this is because I had never actually experienced what it is to have a relational intimacy without sex. I'd never put myself in a position to do that. Now, one thing that if you've been married forever and you have opened up, someone said to me when I was a teenager, once you pop, you can't stop. Once you've opened that can, it's really hard to close that can again, because your body now knows what that feels like. So I intentionally stopped watching any programming that included sexual anything. I actually don't watch anything. I think this is the first week that I actually started watching some programming, and it's nothing about that. It's reality. But anything that involved sex, anything that even involved relationships in general, I stopped watching altogether, because now I was watching more sermons, getting more into the Word, getting more into my Bible, and realizing I actually don't miss TV at all. But it needed to be an intentional decision because I need to reset my body. Now, I didn't realize I needed to reset my body until I started ovulating. And my ovulation is wild, okay? My body is so used to sex being available that I would see, oh guys, I have a particular man that I like, I am attracted to. If I see a man that looks like that, my body goes, hey, how's it? How you? Can I sit down and talk to you? This is why I have Claudia. Claudia sits by my side and is my Jonathan and is like my David. She's like, no, girl, let's go. But my body and my mind and where my spiritual life is was competing with one another. My body, yo, the flesh is rough, eh? This girl will wake up if she sees a hot man. And then all of a sudden I'm conversationary and I'm wanting to give hugs. Like, so if you read Alisa Vitti's book on how the woman's cycle works and how to live through your cycle, because you actually get healthier, it can cure endometriosis without medication. You learn how your body actually functions and when is the best time to be outdoors and the best time to be making business deals and the best time to be closing off deals and all of that kind of thing. And when I read that book, it made a lot of sense to me, because now I pay very close attention to when my ovulation is, because I lock myself indoors. I know there'll be a point when I have subdued my body and she won't be reactive anymore. Someone said to me this week, I need to pray to deaden everything. But then I must remember when I get married again to pray to wake up everything. Because the girl will sabotage you. Okay. I've managed to keep my distance, which is great. But when we were having this conversation, a lot more came up. Things that I'm realizing still in 2023, we are not talking about, which is wild to me, because we see sex all of the time. It's all over the TV. It's all over billboards. It's literally everything in Cape Town streets. That's all people talk about. How they're going to orgies, how they are going to swingers parties, how they are doing all the things. Y'all, like Sodom and Gomorrah 2.0. Okay? Um, but we don't actually talk about sex. Like, we hear about it, we talk about the act, we talk about the people talk about what they are doing and like the excitement they're having, and but we don't actually talk about the actual act. And it made me go back and think about what happened prior to getting married. So obviously, if you're in a Christian church and you're born again and all of that, even if you're semi-born again and you look born again to the Christian people because they don't really know, right? Um, you go for marriage counseling and all that. We went for marriage counseling. We spoke about sex once. And you know what they said in the marriage counseling? This was the moment that just broke me. I don't have an example now. I'm going to use the pen. He said, he took a pen, he hit it on the table, and he said, so, you know sex. When his thing is like this, you can't say no. Literally, and he demonstrated with a pen. Oh, shoot. Um, no, toilet paper. Let me just wipe up here. Sorry, the coffee spilled. That was literally the marriage counseling sex conversation. And the more and more I hear, the more I hear from people, they are being told that women are not allowed to deny sex. And that's about the extent of the conversation, which is really hilarious to me, because there's so much, if you haven't had sex before, that you need to know. Like anatomy stuff, like basic biology. It's like, it's things that are in your body. Like, I don't understand why we're not talking about the stuff. Like, I had someone who got married who was so funny, who called me and said, because she was a virgin when she got married, she called me a week later. She's like, oh my God, why did you not tell me how disgusting this was? And I laughed. I was like, what do you mean it's disgusting? She says, no, man, y'all should have told me I must get towels and how messy it gets and all of that. And Claudia's pulling her face really hilariously, by the way. And the reason she would call me and say that is because clearly she had no education on sex. Like, your conversation on sex has also been bare minimum, which is why you cringe when we talk about it, right? My conversation on sex was that my birds and the bees conversation was heavy petting. If someone can Google heavy petting and see what that says, yeah, I actually Googled it yesterday after we spoke. It says, I don't know how to explain it in English. There's an actual term in Afrikaans for it. It's called broekskoot. The Afrikaans people will know. I'll show you because, yeah. Anyway. But my thing is, I don't understand why we're not talking about it. So the thing that was curious to me is that I spoke to my children about their genitalia and stuff early on when they were very young. And I'd get scolded for it. Like, why would you tell your children about this stuff? And I'm like, I am not raising children. I'm raising adults. If I don't make these children comfortable around the conversation about sex, they're going to hide it if it's happening. Right? I tell my son, keep your thing in your pants. I tell my daughter, keep your panty on. They're teenagers. What am I going to do? Am I going to pretend as though I don't know what's happening outside in the streets? I live in a city where the streets are at my door. Do you understand what I'm saying? There are so much things happening. I'm not protecting my children by not talking to them about it. Right? And obviously I talk to them what is age appropriate. Like my 11 and 9-year-old, we're not having that level of conversation. But my teenager is 17, handsome, tall. The girls hit on him when I walk with him. Of course I'm going to be talking to him about the stuff. I just don't think it's wise, I think, in certain circles to think this is such a taboo topic, because it isn't. I was saying to you yesterday, we need to be talking about this the same way we talk about food, right? Because it's happening all the time, every day. I'm drinking my cup of coffee, and across the world somewhere 5,000 people are having sex right now. That's how common it is. It's not like, oh my gosh, I can't talk about it because I might sin. Come on. Like, you're less likely to sin if I tell you the anatomy, what happens, why your body responds this way, and why it's important to only do it in marriage.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you wrap it up. But no, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about how our bodies react. We can't talk about being attracted or getting wet. Or I'm just like, yo, they're talking about that on children's programs these days. That they are educating our kids more than we are willing to educate our kids because we are so terrified to talk about it. The funny thing about this is that every single thing we've been terrified to talk about has changed society because it's happening. Whether you pretend to not see it or not, it's it's happening in the church in droves. Okay, every single. Let me not say that. I'm gonna get into trouble. But I mean, I was pregnant before I got married, and I was singing in a worship team, and they put me down. They didn't put my ex-husband down. He could still work in the church. I had to sit. So this is just, it's crazy to me that we don't talk about sex. So one of the biggest things for me is I wanted to address something that we don't talk about when it comes to marriage and divorce, right? If you've been married for a long time, your body is used to doing things a particular way. When you move into a new season of your life out of marriage and you're divorced, which is happening to 60% of people, which is why we need to be having this conversation. And if staying, like getting back to a place of purity is important to you, your body doesn't automatically switch to virgin mode. Like I tell everybody, I'm growing my hymen back. Like that is standard. I'm like, God can do anything. He will grow my hymen back. Okay? Even if it's in the spirit. But we need to have a conversation around why um why we're not telling the women and men who are divorced that your body is not going to switch off of sex. It's going to crave it. It's going to want it. It's built into your DNA now because you've been doing it for so long. You're not automatically not going to have lustful thoughts or get horny, and I'm going to use that word, because you're now signed divorce papers. There are attractive people everywhere. You can't miss them. Do you know what I'm saying? But it's something, if you're planning like me to be celibate, it's a conversation you need to have with yourself. Um, and because when I get married, I want to actually get to the place where I finally enjoy sex. I enjoy the lovemaking act because it's going to add to the intimacy that I already have to my next marriage. Do you understand what I'm saying? It tainted it for me in my last marriage because there was no intimacy whatsoever. The sex was just a commodity. I don't ever want that to be my thing. But what I also found was sex can be a distraction. And the reason I say that is, number one, there's a spiritual tie that you're making with this person, right? And I'd already done that enough times in my life. I just needed to stop it, and I actually broke those spiritual ties that I'd connected to people from when I was young. Um, so that happens. And if you're planning to be in a relationship with someone, and I love this, I heard one of the podcasts talk about it that I was watching the other day. They were talking about how you blur the lines if you involve sex early, right? Or if you involve sex at all, if you're not planning to marry this person, why are you sleeping with them? Because now your body is responding to the dopamine created during the sexual act. So now the lines are blurred between whether you actually like this person or not, right? You're not giving yourself more clarity. You're just adding more problems to your life. That's one of the main reasons for me. But also, obviously, my relationship with God is the first reason. Like, first and foremost, I'm going to do what He wants me to do. And it's not sleeping with anybody at all. And not even attempting to cross any of those lines. But your body is not automatically switching back to, oh, I don't know what sex is like. Like, she knows what sex is like, and there were times she really liked it. So now she sees someone handsome during ovulation, and she's just like, hey, how you doing, sir? And your pheromones are all over the place, and then those times the men notice. There's something that I think I started to realize now is that a lot of my insecurities as a teenager, with regards to my daddy issues, um, I found using sex as a way, like I said earlier, to get attention. But I was so careful to find, I guess, nuanced ways to attract people. One of them I speak about every now and then is I started smoking when I was 11, and there were two major reasons. The first thing was I was always in trouble with my dad, and my dad didn't play. Like, I was the girl who was going to be bruised with the kind of hidings that I got, and I got those kind of hidings until I was about 16. So I know I got into trouble one day, and there was a shop across the road, and my neighbor was standing there and smoking. And when I walked inside, the cigarette smoke calmed me down immediately. But not long before that, I watched a movie with this beautiful, sexy woman with this red lips and this long cigarette. And I was like, okay, is that how I get attention? Because the only attention I ever got from my dad was angry attention, right? So I know I lacked that kind of safety and masculine energy in my life. And I was going to find, my brain automatically went, okay, this is a way to fill the gap. Pull in another man, and you have to be as sexy as possible. We were talking about this the other day. When I talk about sexy as possible, me and my best friend at the time were literally walking around a colored area, Akasi, guys, the hood, with bikinis on during the day after school. We had no reason to be walking around with bikinis. Okay, our booties and everything was in the street. But we both, and for me particularly, I won't speak for her, but for me, I just really longed for someone to want me. That one thing was driving me to make the stupidest decisions. But at the time, I had no one who was talking into my life. And all I knew was that I was a nuisance to my father. So I needed to find someone who wanted to be with me. It didn't matter which way, right? Um, and I thought being married, getting divorced, doing all of this healing work, that I had resolved that, until I decided to be celibate. Then I realized I didn't resolve any of that. So in the week I spoke about Instagram that I was going to mention, why makeup? And I'm wearing makeup now, and going forward in my podcast I will be wearing makeup because I ain't gonna look thirsty and tired anymore, okay? Um, but I'm conscious of it now. So what was happening was I was wearing makeup because I knew it would get me the same attention, right? When I was ovulating, I'd find, because I want to be outdoors and I want to be friendly, my body was telling me the prettier you look, the more attention you're going to get. You're most likely going to draw someone in so that it makes you feel filled for that time. All of it was off. And the more this was happening, the more I was asking myself the question, why do I feel a particular way when I put makeup on? Why am I looking at myself in the mirror and being like, okay, I look good, whatever. But what is it I'm trying, what am I aiming to do with this? And it really made me question my my need for being wanted, and how I was using sex and attraction as a way to get the lack that I felt I needed. That was a very big wake up call, because I mean, what, 18, 19 years after doing all of this as a teenager, I still hadn't sealed that door, because I didn't even know that the door was there, and I left it open, and it was still calling for the same level of access. And that's something I'm actively working on, because this realization made me notice that if God wants me to get remarried, I'm gonna stop saying that. My friend said I'm gonna stop saying that. But I do want to get remarried, and with more intention and clarity. And as I pray for God, to God for wisdom and for clarity on myself, I will not attract the man God needs for me purpose wise, or wants for me purpose wise, if I still have that door open. I'll be attracting the man who comes for the fun time and leaves repeatedly over and over and over again, because I'm looking for fulfillment. But I'm not someone who's willing to sleep with you after just knowing you is not in this because they see purpose in you. They're in it because they see someone who's going to give them what they want when they want it. And it will be the same situation played out again. It will be a commodity, like it was in my marriage. That is not something I'm willing to do at all. Like, I've walked this journey once. Once is enough. Shame on me. Enough for the one time. um, I think, yeah, for divorced people, we really need to sit with ourselves and understand. Number one, we need to learn to subdue our bodies and train it how to sit down. But we also need to understand that if we have any emotional and spiritual and deep wound connections when it comes to sex, when it comes to the way we behave around people, when it comes to managing our personalities because we want people to like us. Hey, the way that we kind of tailor ourselves to be in certain environments. This is why I extract myself from environments where I feel like people are going to need me to be a different way than I actually am. Because the second I start to do that, it's going to play out in all the areas of my life. And then I prevent my purpose from playing out because now I'm managing me according to other people and not according to God and the Word. That is a big red flag. But then also, I feel like for the younger people who haven't gone through the stuff like this, and I mean, this really, I think, is for people like you. We need to really have more open conversations about sex where, for instance, if you had a curious question, you could come and ask and it wouldn't be like, oh my God, why are we talking about this? Like, why are we even doing that? Like, why are we even, I know a lot of this is cringy for you because you've never had any of these conversations, but I, that's why I'm saying we need to treat it like food. If I eat a meal every day and there's, like I was asking you yesterday, what is the dessert you've always wanted that you never had? You need to think, for in your case, for instance, you need to think about sex that way. This is a dessert I've never had, but I know what ingredients go into that dessert. And I'd like to know, because this is why I'm curious to have it. Sex should be treated the same way. What ingredients go into a sexual relationship? What kind of things am I allowed and not allowed to do? I was reading yesterday in the Bible, they were talking about sodomy, and I was just like, there are things in Christian circles. What people tend to do is they teach you, like I said earlier, women are not allowed to say no to their husbands for sex, but they don't also tell you what the limitations for sex are, because they should be, right? When it said sodomy yesterday, I was just like, wait, so we're not allowed, like, is anal sex a sin? Are you crossing lines if you're doing anal sex? Like, we're not allowed to talk about sex because we don't talk out to the bedroom. We don't hang out dirty laundry. I'm like, really? Really? I can tell you now how many Christian born again marriages allow pornography inside their marriage. They allow their partners to go to strip clubs and they go with them. Because in their mind, they're like, we are culturally invested in what's happening in the world, and I want to keep my husband happy, so I'm going to do all of these lovely things with him or for him. I'm going to bring porn, or I'm going to watch porn and try and be the porn star. That is not building an intimate, close relationship with your partner. That is introducing something from outside that is going to taint your relationship. This is why having sex and the conversation around sex prior, during, and after marriage needs to be discussed, because there are things that we should not even allow ourselves to engage in. I came to Cape Town, I was here 3 months, and a friend of mine said he got an apartment, and the guy that he got an apartment from immediately invited him to a swingers party. I was like, this is just so nonchalant. So I can't imagine what is happening in Christian circles, because Christian people are going to hide it under a rug, but they're doing it. We can't pretend that it's not happening because we're not talking about it. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, imagine we never spoke about food. Like, never. How weird would that be? Oh no, I'm not eating. Then we go hide in a corner and eat. How weird. And then food is being sold in every store. It's exactly the same thing. It's just crazy to me. So we need to really talk about this intimate stuff. So with regards to boundaries around sex, I don't really know all of the boundaries yet around when it comes to marital sex. I do think that God would enjoy, like, would want you to enjoy sex. He made it for that purpose. He made it for reproduction, but also for the intimacy part, and it's a very intimate act. But I also think that there are things that are extreme. When pornography was introduced to my marriage, and it was introduced prior to my marriage, I don't have, I physically have a reaction to pornography, like, because of previous sexual trauma. I physically have a reaction. So the first time pornography was brought to me, before I got married, I went to throw up because it felt so violating to me, right? And pornography was brought up 2 or 3 times in my marriage as well, and I literally deafened my ears to it because I was just like, I have a trauma built into my body around sexual abuse, right? I can't. even imagine watching porn and not feeling like I'm gonna die. For me, it has a massive trigger effect. So it's conversations even like that. So I'm curious to know if there are any counselors who sit down with their people prior to getting married and saying to them, what is your thoughts on pornography? What is your thoughts on certain sexual acts? What limitations do you want to go? For people who don't know, like you, explaining the types of things that can happen, might happen, if when you get married, sitting down with your partner and having a conversation around his sexual expectations, if he does watch pornography, which will influence his sexual expectations. All of those things need to be conversation. It need to be full conversations. Some of the stuff need to be table conversations with our children. What are your thoughts about sex? What are your thoughts about the conversations you're having at school? Schools now, in particular in Cape Town, are pushing the narrative for being gay and the same-sex bathrooms and transgenders. Like Cape Town is at the forefront of that conversation. I don't want my child to come home and tell me they are confused about what's going on because of what they're being taught. I need to be the person they get that information from around all of these topics that the world has made, or Christian circles have made taboo. I want to sit at a table with them and say, look, I know your body. You are a teenager now. Your body is going to respond in a particular way. In the morning, men get up with an erection. That's normal. But let's talk around your understanding around sex, how it needs to be used, how it's used safely, why it's great to protect it until you're married. All of those conversations are so important. And then going into making them feel like, I mean, most boys masturbate, right? Most boys. Having a conversation with them around masturbation and not making them feel like they're gonna die because you're bringing it up. This is how our children feel safe. And we need to allow ourselves to open those safe spaces to have these conversations in general. The further we make these topics untouchable, the worse the Sodom and Gomorrah story is going to get. I have heard stories that will traumatize the wisest person. You know, that they don't even shock me anymore. The only way we can protect ourselves is by actually openly talking about it, which is why I'm openly talking about my season of staying indoors during ovulation to protect my salvation. I gotta put a leash on myself, okay? And Claudia is helping me remarkably with that, which is great because she has no experience in it. So when I'm talking about something, she's just like, "That's gross." Like, no, we don't need to be having that conversation. Birth makes her cringe. And I've had 4 babies, so I got a lot of stories, okay? But I'm opening this conversation and I'm hoping that people are open to talk a little bit more about it. I know for many people, they've grown up in circles and situations where it was like, even having your period was a conversation we're not going to have, and you, which is even worse wild for me. Like, women are having their period from the age of like 12 for the whole life, their whole lives. Like, you're in, like, then we're not allowed to talk about it because it's blood and it's bleeding and it's coming out of your vagina. Oh my gosh, really? Like, really, you wouldn't be alive if your mother didn't have periods. You wouldn't, because then she wouldn't be ovulating. The biology, like, it's biology. It's not science. It's not so far fetched that we can't fathom the idea that a woman bleeds every month and we're not allowed to talk about it. Like, I cannot understand humans, to be very honest with you. And I think, and I always say this, but I'm going to try and be gentle about it because I'm actually very mean about it most of the time. I don't understand why humans are so easily uh, would rather be drones and rather be mindless and rather fall into a narrative of, oh my gosh, we're not going to do this. Let's just do this and pretend that all this is not happening. I feel like that is such a boring life. Like, curiosity should be your thing, man. Like, if you're not curious about something, that means you have shame around it. How can you have shame about something that, this is the thing for me. I can't have shame around the conversation of sex or periods because I wouldn't have my 4 beautiful children if I didn't have sex or my periods. My children are God's gift to me, despite the fact that I'm not with them. How they didn't come with a stalk. Conversation, things that people are still telling their children. It's crazy to me. So yeah, I feel like I rambled there for a bit, but I want to know what your thoughts are. Tell me what your thoughts are around the conversation around sex, about post-divorce, celibacy, about post-divorce sexual relations, about just how you are responding, how your body's responding if you've gotten divorced to either your pheromones or or wanting sex or feeling like you need sex, and how you feel like that is connected to maybe a lack or a loss or a need in your life. Because we don't talk about this in every layer that I think it deserves a conversation. We kind of just keep it at the surface and be like, okay, no, it's okay. We don't need to talk about the rest of this, when the rest of that is actually the important parts. You actually resolve and tie up a lot of issues that you don't know you have when you start digging a little bit deeper. And I'm hoping this conversation is basically the beginning of a deeper conversation around how we talk about sex, why we talk about sex, the kinds of things we should be thinking about, pre-divorce, premarital counseling, sex in marriage, how your body responds after divorce. All of these things are really, I think, very important conversations. And for those of us who really value our salvation with Christ, it needs to happen, because you don't automatically just know what to do. Getting divorced didn't solve a lot of problems for me. It created a lot more that I didn't even know I had. And it opened up issues that I am now having to face head on, you know? Um, so, yeah, I just hope this conversation is meaningful in that way. Hit me up, message me, like, follow. I'm on Instagram, all those things, all those wonderful things. And then let me know what you think and your thoughts. I'm going to put a story up on Instagram just asking you guys what you think about topics like this, and why, at what point do you think society is going to get to a point where we talk more openly about this? Because I can guarantee you, when we do, and when it's not such a shameful thing to talk about, the amount of teenage pregnancies, sexual promiscuity, sexual abuse, all of that stuff is going to drop, because people are going to feel safe enough to open up about it. Because sexual abusers highly likely have been sexually abused themselves, but have been shamed into not talking. We need to create the safe spaces for that to happen. So that's me. Um, Also, comment on our setup, man. We went a little bit extra, and I think we're going to be doing this regularly. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. Bye.